This week on The Travel Detective, it's known for its rainforested mountains, some of the best beaches in the Caribbean, and a rich colonial history. Let me share with you some of my hidden gems of St. Kitts. That's our cover story. Plus, there's nothing more frustrating than a language barrier when visiting a new country. Forewarned is forearmed, so learn which nations are the least English proficient. And then, it is a true Turkish delight, built during the Ottoman Empire, a symbol of wealth and power, and it's played host to countless heads of state and royalty. It's the Shiran Palace, a true hotel with a past. I'm Peter Greenberg. All that and more on this edition of The Travel Detective. It was home to the first British colony in the Caribbean. And like most islands in the West Indies, it's known for its warm turquoise waters, its uncrowded beaches, and the friendly locals. But it's a whole lot more than just those beaches, golf courses, and those inevitably dangerous rum cocktails. So let me share with you some of my hidden gems of St. Kitts. Located in the Eastern Caribbean, St. Kitts is one of two islands officially called the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, and it's the smallest sovereign state in the Western Hemisphere. Despite its size, you'll probably want to rent a car, which is easy to do, and then you can drive around the entire island in about an hour and a half. But let's be serious, I'm not suggesting you see the entire island in 90 minutes. Traveling by car simply gives you the options to get to the views, then stop, and take your time. You'll pass remnants of old sugar plantations all over the island. There's a large one right near Gibbons Hill. Here, you get a real feel for what was once the world's leading producer of sugarcane. It's also a great place to take in ocean views, as well as neighboring St. Eustatius. And, in the other direction, St. Kitts' highest peak, the volcanic Mount Layamiga. The lava flow created these impressive rock formations called black rocks, but you'll need to get out of the car and walk to really see them. And while you're here, that's where you'll find some small craft stalls. It's a great place to pick up some local color without the crowds. One of the best perspectives of St. Kitts is at the top of Timothy Hill, and the best time to do it is at sunrise. From here, you'll have a view of the Atlantic Ocean to the left, the Caribbean to the right, with the island of Nevis as a backdrop. And of course, the obvious advantage of getting here early is that most tourists only see this place after 11 in the morning, so you're likely to have this location all to yourself. When you're ready, it's just a short drive into Basse-Terre, the island's capital. The center of town is called the Circus, and if it looks familiar, it's because it's named after London's Piccadilly Circus. And that's because in 1623, St. Kitts became England's mother colony, the first outpost in the West Indies. This may have been good for the Brits, but not so much for the native Caribbeans, whose population had already suffered at the hands of Christopher Columbus when he visited in 1493. To put it mildly, history records that Columbus took few prisoners. In fact, his arrival spelled the beginning of the end for the native inhabitants. Columbus named the island St. Christopher in honor of his patron saint, but it was later shortened to St. Kitts. Then it suffered again from French and Spanish attacks throughout both the 17th and 18th centuries. In 1967, St. Kitts finally became an independent state, along with the island of Nevis. Today, the narrow streets are still lined with distinctive Caribbean buildings, cafes, street vendors, and small shops, and the rhythm and style of daily life hasn't changed much, which is a good thing. But if you get lucky and your timing is right, you might see something really special.
The Masquerade is our local culture, and it first originated in West Africa. That is where it was given down to us from our forefathers, and we adopted it today culturally, and we began to practice, and we continue doing it for centuries on anything.
Jason Wilkes is part of the Valens Masquerade, named for his father, and the group has been around for over 50 years. The masks harken back to the darker days of slavery, when their masters demanded that the slaves perform for them. And their colorful costumes and instruments play an important storytelling element of the masquerade.
The drums were adapted from Africa back in the days, and the whip, as it is, was used to keep slaves and workers, in control.
You can even see a little bit of the history of slavery in St. Kitts, right here in Independence Square. Today it looks like your average park, but it's a park with a dark past because it's the site of a former slave market where they were sold to plantation owners. Only a handful of the buildings around the square are the original structures, but you need to take a closer look. Then you'll see basement windows along the sidewalk. This is where the slaves were held captive while awaiting the auctions. From here, it's just a short walk to St. George's Anglican Church. The original church was built on this site in 1670 and was repeatedly damaged and rebuilt after numerous fires, an earthquake, and a hurricane. And try to make it to the church's rooftop. It's got one of the best views of St. Kitts and the surrounding islands. Just a few blocks away, you'll come across a quiet plaza with a tall obelisk as the centerpiece. It's the St. Kitts War Memorial, honoring the locals who lost their lives during both World War I and World War II. And then, just 15 minutes away, you're outside the city and in an entirely different world. It's the island's not-so-hidden gem. The Central Reserve Rainforest covers about 25% of St. Kitts, and as opposed to other rainforests around the world, this one's actually growing. And one of the best ways to see it is on one of these. See ya. You can ride for miles here, from the mountains in the interior of the island down to the coastline. And it's still growing, because the halt in sugarcane production back in 2005 has now allowed the forest to spread out into areas that were once dominated by that sugarcane. And let me remind you, you're in a rainforest, so there's a reasonably good chance you're gonna get wet. But the real beauty comes when you hike in the rainforest.
The leaf from this tree here,
Oh, yeah.
and it's been recommended to make a tea.
I went with O'Neill Mulrain, who grew up on this island and created many of these trails. How long will we trek?
It's a mile and a half in, and the whole journey could be like 2 hours, 2.5.
Is it dangerous?
I would say no, because I actually take time and cut a footpath out to make a trail. So most of the trail we're going to use today is what I cut open with my machete knife to make it possible.
What makes this rainforest so special?
It is because now we have like 400 different species of tree standing out there, and they all stand for a purpose. You know, in the world today, it's like 35% of medicine in the world is coming from trees that grow in forest area, and that's what we got here.
And just outside the rainforest, you'll find the Wingfield Estates, the first plantation in St. Kitts, and believed to be the first English settlement throughout the Americas. It's no longer a working plantation, but it is an active archaeological site. You'll see what it was like in the 1600s when tobacco and sugar were king. And here's a surprise. Its first owner was the great-great-grandfather of Thomas Jefferson. But don't leave before you get down into the tunnels. That's where you can see a 17th century rum distillery. Why rum? Surprise, it's made from sugarcane. And speaking of ruins, you'll need to get a boat to find this one, but it's worth it. About 12 miles out of Frigate Bay, you'll find yourself here in Shitten Bay. That's S-H-I-T-T-E-N for those censors who might be watching. And that's where you'll find the wreck of the unique R1. That ship met its end back in Hurricane Earl in 2010. You can swim right up to the shallow shipwreck. Just be sure not to get too close, because you don't want to touch the rusty, jagged metal. But you'll want to keep on snorkeling once you've checked it out. The water's warm and the visibility is pretty good. There's a lot to see. Because St. Kitts is such a small island, most businesses are still family-owned, and they've been in those families for generations. Like Brimstone Hot Sauce, a Caribbean-style pepper sauce which is made right here in a small one-room factory. It's run by Donnie Bristol, using a recipe that was created by his grandfather. You don't just visit the factory, you can even help make the hot sauce.
You have the privilege of testing today.
But I gotta warn you, this stuff is really hot.
Is it hot enough to leave it?
It's hot enough to ask for a glass of water immediately. Or check out Spratnet, where the locals go to find the freshest seafood.
That's what we do. We eat what we catch.
Marky Spencer and his family have fished these waters for decades.
This is a better one,
talking. Heading out every morning for fish and lobster.
We did pretty good, you know.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. And then bringing their catch to be cooked up and served in their restaurant the very same day. Then there's Judah Farai, who runs a small restaurant called Ital Creations. He sources the organic fruits and vegetables that he then uses for his vegan and vegetarian meals from the garden right on his property, which was started by his grandfather.
My grandfather always tell me, plant enough food because you know the animals gonna eat some, the bats and the birds gonna eat. You have to give away some. You
That's
leave
inevitable.
some for yourself. So you know, plant enough.
Have you planted enough?
I plant enough. The monkeys getting some, I getting some. I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied with what I get. I give him thanks for for all the blessings.
Right.
Yes.
And finally, there's Salt Pleasure. Here you need to ask their resident mixologist to make you the house special. It's called the Waiolito.
You're going to need some lime, some mint, and then we model some ice, some grapefruit juice, pink grapefruit juice, freshly squeezed, some wild berry puree, a large measure of rum. Then we stir, add a little more ice, top up with some soda. And here we have our Waiolito.
Then sit back, and if you're like me, you'll take in the views, not just of the water, but of the dreamy super yachts in Christoph Harbor. And then, like St. Kitts itself, it becomes your own special, secluded anchorage. If English is your first language, and it also happens to be your only language, well, you're not alone. Only about 20% of Americans speak a foreign language with some degree of fluency. And if you're a traveler, it really helps to know which country's citizens have the highest English language proficiency. Going to Argentina or Chile? Well, then you're in good shape. A growing number of their citizens speak English, but no hablo español won't get you far in Colombia or Panama. They've been ranked among the 25 worst countries for English proficiency. Topping the list as the world's least English proficient country, not surprisingly, Iraq, closely followed by, also not surprisingly, Libya. On the flip side, the most English proficient foreign country is the Netherlands. About 90% of Dutch citizens speak some level of English. And what about the rest of Europe? About 66% of all Europeans are bilingual or multilingual. In a city of palaces, it's both a hotel and an authentic Ottoman palace. And it holds a unique place in the history of a city and of a country. Sultans lived here. Wars were declared here. Peace treaties signed here. It was burned to the ground, then rebuilt from the ashes. And it's still making history today. It's the Shiran Palace in Istanbul, a true hotel with a past. That's our cover story. You can't talk about Turkey without addressing its remarkable history. Consider this: 80 million residents and a very young republic, founded only in 1923. And it seems that just about everyone at one point wanted to call it home. The Romans, the Byzantines, and the Ottomans occupied the country. Why? As they say, it's all about location, location, location. Turkey bridges both Europe and Asia, and Istanbul is the only city in the world that resides on two continents. The dividing line is the Bosphorus, a narrow strait of water that is one of the world's busiest maritime passages. And that's what brings you to the Shiran Palace, which sits on the European side. It's the last of the royal family palaces built by the Ottoman Empire. It reopened its doors as a hotel in 1991, but Shiran Palace dates back over 100 years before that, with a history as rich and tumultuous as the Ottoman Empire itself.
Shiran Palace is actually the story of Turkey.
Ralph Radke has been the general manager of Shiran Palace since 2011.
Because it was the power place. It was the place where the destiny of the Ottoman Empire was forged.
Everywhere you walk in the hotel, you're seeing history. The tile work, the glass chandeliers, and the artwork. 19th century in the Ottoman Empire was known as the Tulip period, with lavish nighttime parties celebrating music, flowers, and of course, the culture of the elite. Serdar Gulgun is an expert on this period of the Ottoman Empire and knows this hotel's history well.
Our tulip era was the period where flourished the literature, the art, the music, and a bit of decadence as well. Shiran literally means the light or lantern. In this tulip era, the name comes from big parties, big gatherings lit with candles in this garden.
In fact, these parties were so popular that the region also came to be known as Shiran. And in 1834, the Sultan Mahmud II selected this as the site for his new palace. It was within the wooden walls of the first Shiran Palace that the Ottoman Empire declared war on Russia on September 25, 1853, entering the Crimean War, a massive international conflict that helped preserve the Ottoman Empire. And during that war, Shiran Palace was demolished and then rebuilt. Finished in 1871, the new marble palace was and still is considered to be one of the finest examples of Ottoman architecture, the prize home of Sultan Abdulaziz. But it was also a time of internal conflict, as both Abdulaziz and his successor Murad V were deposed, and then they were directly imprisoned in Shiran. Soon, several hundred of Murad's supporters stormed the palace in a bloody but unsuccessful attempt to restore him to power. In 1909, the palace was renovated once again, this time to house the parliament. But on January 6, 1910, only 2 months after the parliament took residence, a fire started in the attic. Within 5 hours, the Grand Shiran Palace burned down, its downfall coming only slightly before the end of the Ottoman Empire itself. The palace remained neglected until World War I, when an outfit of the French military's Field Corps engineers were housed there, one of the more luxurious army barracks in history. In 1930, an even more surprising use was found for the palace, as the gardens were transformed once again.
When I was a little boy in Istanbul, I remember that people used to play football in the gardens of this palace.
Some of the outer buildings on the grounds were converted into schools or storage, but the main palace sat for decades, just a reminder of its past glory, in ruins.
It was a shell, no roof, just the walls, remains of the walls, beautiful remains of marble carvings of the exterior.
And the palace remained in that very condition until 1985, when work began to transform the abandoned palace into a magnificent 5-star hotel.
Being able to stay in a palace that sultans slept and stayed, it's a privilege.
From the remains of the fire, the original palace was restored, and a new building was added, totaling 310 rooms, with 11 suites in the original palace building. The biggest and the grandest room is, of course, the Sultan Suite. It's over 4,000 square feet with 24-hour butler service, and it comes with a royal price tag, about $35,000 a night. And many old-school service traditions remain.
I think many generations, now the last two generations at least, they lost the real sense of what we did in the hospitality at the time. Old-school hospitality is craftsmanship. It cannot be industrialized. It has to be personalized. Because at the end of the day, you can have the best hotel room in the world. If the service doesn't live up to the expectations of your guests, it's not worthwhile. So we invest a lot in the training of our people.
And that carefully crafted hospitality includes everything from shoe shining to handcrafted chocolate, to an up-close and personal look at the palace's past. Historian Elizabeth Kurumlu, an expert on the Ottomans, took me through the old wing. So this is the hammam, the original one.
The original one of the few places that remained after 1910, after the fire.
Wow. And they've restored it.
They restored it beautifully.
Not only did the hammam survive, so did the bathing rituals. A Turkish bath is practically a religious experience, cleansing the body and the spirit. And the food here isn't just a gastronomic experience, it also has a special history.
Ottoman cuisine is about novelty. The Sultans loved to be entertained in any way you can, and food was part of the entertainment. And the kitchen was a major part of all the palaces.
So what would be on a typical Ottoman cuisine menu?
Meat, for sure. Definitely be lots of meat, because many of the Sultans loved going hunting. And then you have the dessert section.
My favorite.
Mine too. Because the Turks had always historically, true, and even today, had a sweet tooth, as you know.
One of the signature dishes here is testi kebab, which is meat and vegetables cooked and served in a clay pot. But make sure you save room for those desserts. It's all made fresh here every day, from scratch. Whether it's sütlaç, the Turkish signature rice pudding, or flaky and over-the-top rich baklava. This cart makes the rounds of Shiran Palace every day, and at first glance, you might think it's delivering yet another dessert. But it's actually a treat of another kind, artisanal soap. Made right here in the hotel, then hand-carved with your choice of fragrance. So it's not surprising to note, the Shiran Palace continues to attract modern-day royalty.
We had a lot of kings and queens, like the King of Holland, the King of Norway. We have the stars, also singers and actors and politicians.
But the real stars of the Shiran Palace are the ghosts of the sultans and their enduring legacy. Not to mention that the Shiran redefines the term rooms with a view to the outside and the Bosphorus and the dozens of ships sailing by, each with stories waiting to be told. And then to the inside with never-ending views of world history that continue to be told. That'll do it for this week. I'll see you next time on another edition of The Travel Detective.